The opinions expressed on the following program are strictly those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of WCZT, Regional Media, Coastal Broadcasting, personnel, or advertisers. This broadcast of Money Talk with Melanie was previously recorded.
Money Talk with Melanie features entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to another edition of Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your host, Melanie Collette, broadcasting live from beautiful Wildwood, New Jersey, here on 98.7 The Coast. Our guests this evening are Monica Bryant, Esquire. She is the founder of Triage Cancer, and she's going to discuss with us this evening what to do when diagnosed with a serious medical condition. Now what? Here are 3 steps to avoid financial ruin. And then our second hour, we're going to speak with author Brett Oubre, who's going to discuss his upcoming book, 12 Steps to Boundaryless Success. Very excited to speak to him this evening. But before we get to that, we're going to speak about a few items in the news here lately regarding the economy and finances. One of the biggest things that's going on, of course, is the upcoming midterms and the Biden administration trying to get things done to stave off the inflation, which is now up to 9.1%. And just to give you kind of a marker of where we were a couple of years ago before the Biden administration came into office, we were at about 1% inflation, and now we're up to 9.1%. And for some reason, I don't know why, the Biden administration seems to think that by infusing the economy with more money will help inflation. And that's literally, just from a basic economy 101, the opposite of what putting more money into the economy does. And Bernie Sanders has accused Joe Manchin, who is a Democrat, but who is in a purpley state of West Virginia, who represents West Virginia, is a senator in West Virginia, Joe Manchin, who has been a deciding vote along with Senator Sinema in Arizona, I believe, is where Sinema is, and who is also in a purpley kind of state. And those people that they represent do not want to see any more money going into the economy because they are aware that it causes inflation. You lower the value of the dollar, and that causes more inflation. But Bernie Sanders has called Joe Manchin out and says that he is intentionally sabotaging the president's agenda. And I, for one, and this is from an article in Business Insider, by the way, that Bernie Sanders has accused Joe Manchin of intentionally sabotaging the president's agenda. And what, in my opinion, people who are just really strictly about their agenda and not about representing their people, this is not, politicians need to get away from agendas and get closer to representing their people, which is in my opinion, Senator Joe Manchin is doing and Senator Sinema are doing. They're representing their people, and they're doing what their people want them to do, and that's what they should be doing. And if your representatives are not doing this, then that's problematic. You know, you do belong to a caucus when you belong to a party. This is certainly true. But when it comes to your vote, it's not about voting your party. It's about representing your people. And so, yes, you do have to do some negotiations, but Senator Manchin has said very strongly that he's not going to vote for any more spending until inflation is under control. And as long as inflation continues to go up, he's not voting for any more spending. And it's the spending, quite frankly, that has contributed to all of this inflation. Now, Another thing that has, of course, contributed to inflation, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, is demand has not really gone down for supply, which is interesting. Like, we're still spending, but it's the how Americans are spending that is worrisome. You know, the people's savings accounts are going down. People's credit spending is going up. That is worrisome. When you have people's credit spending going up and the interest rates are going up, meaning that you're paying more for using your credit, from an economic standpoint, that's concerning. That's something for you to be worried about. So that's just something to think about, something to stick in your hat. If you're spending more and chopping away at your savings, you want to be concerned about that. But it's hard to not do when everything costs so much. Now, on a positive note, older workers, if you're an older worker and you've been thinking that I'm too old to go back into the workforce, according to MarketWatch, this is something that companies, corporations, and organizations are welcoming back older, more experienced workers. It turns out that experience is king these days. And we're talking, old people in their 60s. Corporations are saying, maybe we do want more experienced people in the workplace. Maybe experience is a thing. And this is also including people who have 2 or 3 years of work gaps in their resumes and in their work experience. Maybe you've experienced health challenges and you took a couple of years off from work. There are people who are returning to work. They have an example of a couple of places in Utah and in other state governments that are providing work programs specifically to retrain people who have been away from the workplace for re-entry into the workforce. And I think that's a very good thing for older workers to get back into the workforce and use their experience, their vast experience, in order to get back into the workforce and help these companies out. Companies are hurting for experienced people in the workplace. So if you are an experienced person and you're thinking that you want to go back to work, you're bored, you're tired of being retired, throw that resume in there, because companies are looking for you. They're not looking so much for people who are not experienced anymore. Sorry, millennials, we love you, but but now they're looking for more experienced people in the workforce, and I think that is a very good thing for those of us who are more experienced and looking for something to do. Coming up, our first guest, Monica Bryant, Esquire. She's the founder of Triage Cancer. She's going to talk to us about what to do when diagnosed with a serious medical condition, how we can avoid facing financial ruin along with that serious medical condition. Very excited to speak to her. We'll be back on the other side of the break.
Money Talk with Melanie features entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
This broadcast of Money Talk with Melanie was previously recorded.
Money Talk with Melanie features lively discussions of a wide range of global, domestic, and kitchen table financial topics. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. I'd like to introduce our first guest. Monica Fawzy Bryant, Esquire, is a cancer rights attorney, speaker, and author dedicated to improving access to quality information on healthcare-related issues. She is the co-founder and chief operating officer for Triage Cancer, a national nonprofit organization that provides education on the practical and legal issues that may impact individuals diagnosed with cancer and their caregivers. Ms. Bryant is the co-author and the first and only book on cancer rights law published by the American Bar Association in 2018. In 2019, she received a 40 Under 40 in Cancer Award, and in 2015 was awarded the Legacy Advocate Award by a leading young adult cancer organization. She is an adjunct law professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago School of Law, teaching a class on cancer rights. Throughout her career, throughout her career, she has been provided more than 1,000 educational seminars for individuals who have been diagnosed with cancer, their caregivers, lawyers, advocates, healthcare professionals, elected officials, and the general public. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Monica Falsey Bryant, Esquire. How are you this evening?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad to have you on the show. I think this is such a very important topic and just never really talked about and much needed. So I was delighted to see your email in my mailbox as a topic to talk about on our show.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that. Most people don't really want to talk about health insurance and employment rights.
But you know what? It's something that nobody thinks about talking about, unfortunately, until they're faced with unfortunately, an unfortunate diagnosis or a family member, and then they're scrambling for this information. And so hopefully if they're scrambling for this information or they Google it, they'll happen upon the show and they'll find some really worthwhile information here. It'll just be another resource that they'll have.
Certainly our goal.
Yeah, indeed. Is there anything else that you'd like to, about your background, you'd like to provide the audience with?
Well, I think you summed it up with my introduction. When my colleague and sister, Joanna Morales, and I co-founded Triage Cancer, we really did so because we don't think people should need a lawyer to survive a serious medical diagnosis like cancer. And so our goal is really to provide education around these topics that doctors don't always talk about, but that are incredibly important and come up after a serious medical diagnosis. And while we are a cancer organization, what we talk about really is applicable to anybody.
And that's the wonderful thing about the subject matters that you discuss. And one of the things that I found is that you say, according to a most recent report, 100 million people in America are saddled with healthcare debt, just healthcare debt alone. And you have some tips on how you can rebuild your financial health after dealing with a serious medical condition. I mean, you can face that just with dental problems or any kind of chronic health condition if you don't have good health care. And it doesn't even have to be something that's death-dealing. It can just be a chronic medical condition like lupus or high blood pressure or something like that, something that's serious but may not kill you.
It's absolutely true, and we've known anecdotally for years that people are dealing with medical debt. In 2009, there was a study that showed that 78% of all bankruptcies in the United States were due to medical debt, and a large percentage of those individuals that declared bankruptcy due to medical debt had health insurance. And so this report, here we are, several years later, where people are still experiencing that problem, tells us that there's still work to be done. A lot of times people will blame the cost of care in the United States, and that is certainly a component of the problem. But what we find is that many people don't know how to pick the right health insurance policies for them. And then even once they get the health insurance, they don't know how to effectively use or navigate those health insurance policies. And those are key factors in being able to avoid crushing medical debt.
Certainly. That is certainly true. And I guess usually people go through their HR departments to pick out their health care. There are very few states in the country that provide financial literacy. I happen to live in one, and in my other life, happen to teach financial literacy. And one of the things that I do teach is how to properly pick out a health insurance plan. Whether or not my students pay attention is a story for another day, but I do happen to teach how to properly pick out one, like the differences between your deductible and a gold plan, a silver plan or a bronze plan, and the differences of what you pay out of pocket, et cetera, and why that makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. We often joke at Triage Cancer that there should be a mandatory class before you get your high school diploma in health insurance and finances, because it's all stuff we need to understand, but most of us aren't ever taught it until we need it, to your point earlier. So I applaud you for teaching that class, and certainly hope your students are listening.
Right, indeed. And I tell them all the time, I'm like, this is probably one of the few you're going to use every single day of your life. You will need this class.
Absolutely. And to your point, in health insurance, it's like learning a new language. And so you have to understand, that a premium is what you're going to be paying monthly just to have health insurance, whether you go to the doctor or not. You have to understand that the deductible is, what you're going to pay out of pocket before the health insurance policy kicks in even. And then you're going to be paying a copay or a cost share, which is the percentage difference between what you pay and what your health insurance pays. So, if someone has an 80-20 plan, what does that mean? Well, first you have to pay that deductible, which could be thousands of dollars. Then the health insurance kicks in and pays your 80%. But I have to tell you, we do a lot of training even of healthcare professionals, and they don't necessarily have a great understanding of how this all works. And most don't even understand the out-of-pocket maximum, which is arguably the most important thing that people should understand about their health insurance policy.
Indeed. I would say the only people who get thorough training on that are probably the people who actually sell the insurance, which I also do, and that's the only reason why I say that. Because of that test.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think, the other people who end up getting trained on it are the people who get diagnosed with serious medical conditions or chronic medical conditions, and they're forced to become experts in this information, on top of dealing with all of the physical and psychosocial things that they have to cope with. And so the other problem is if you don't understand it before you pick the policy, you could end up with a policy that may look inexpensive on its face because there are low monthly premiums, but then when you actually go and use the health insurance, you end up paying huge amounts out of pocket. And that's typically where we see people really struggle. But the good news now, I hate to be all doom and gloom about it, the good news is that with our current system, if someone is in a situation where they have a serious medical condition and they're finding that the health insurance they have right now isn't adequate, there's not a whole lot we can do in this exact moment. But what we can do is help them understand how to pick a new plan come open enrollment, which if someone is buying through the state marketplaces in the fall, most employers will pick a fall open enrollment period to coincide with the first of the year. And then starting in the first of the year, moving forward, they will have more adequate insurance. And so, it's not necessarily a quick fix, but at least now we aren't as locked in as maybe we once were with our insurance policies.
Now, are you still able to do that with a pre-existing condition? Like a chronic pre-existing condition, even if you, like through your employer?
Yes. So under the Affordable Care Act, insurance companies can no longer take pre-existing conditions into consideration when they're deciding if they're going to sell somebody a policy, whether they're deciding if they're going to cover a service or not. They also can't take it into consideration when they are deciding what they're going to charge you anymore.
Oh, really? That part I wasn't aware of. I kind of knew about the couldn't reject you for pre-existing conditions. I didn't know that they couldn't consider the amount that they're going to charge you.
Yeah, so insurance companies are only allowed to look at four things when they're deciding somebody's premium. That is, are they buying an individual plan or a family plan? Generally, family plans are going to be more expensive. You're covering more people. They can take into consideration your geographic location, and that's based on zip code. They can take into consideration your age. So, yes, the older you get, the more expensive insurance is going to get, but it is capped on how much more expensive. So it used to be when you hit certain milestones of ages, you might find that there's like an astronomical increase in your monthly premiums from one year to the next, and that can't happen anymore. And then finally, in most states, they can look at if you use tobacco or not. Some states have eliminated that as a factor. but that is it. So they can't take into consideration health status or pre-existing conditions, and they also can no longer look at gender.
Now that is very interesting because when I'm teaching that, they still do have that in the curriculum that you can look at gender. And of course, in today's climate, I get asked about, well, what if you are, have a different gender? Mm-hmm. And I find that interesting that they can't look at gender, considering that there are some gender-specific illnesses.
So we're only talking about health insurance here, right? So
right.
There are differences when we're talking about potentially disability or life insurance. So specifically related to health insurance, that the Affordable Care Act took that out of the equation. There are, when speaking about gender, to your point, there are some things that are still attached to gender. For example, the Affordable Care Act also said that certain health insurance policies have to cover certain preventative services for free, which means that it can't be applied to the deductible or you can't be charged a copay. And those preventative services are things like, immunizations and mammograms, for example. And those are actually tied to gender under that specific provision. So there are still some gender pieces, but when it comes to deciding what they're going to charge you for your monthly premium, they cannot take that into account anymore.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's very, very, very pared down and specific. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that clarification. That's good. That makes sense. So there is a strategic way to use insurance so that you can mitigate how much you're actually paying or how much medical debt you go into when you have a serious medical diagnosis or a serious illness?
Yeah, so I think, again, starting with understanding the terms and making sure you've picked the right policy, and then paying close attention to what you're actually being charged for. And this can be really challenging when we're talking about a serious medical diagnosis, because you could have multiple tests from different facilities and, many doctors involved in the equation. And so you might be getting bills from a bunch of different places. We think that it is incredibly important to stay organized, which can be easier said than done when you're also dealing with a physical or mental illness. But then to keep track of what are called explanation of benefits, or EOBs, because the EOBs are from the health insurance company, and that's where you can actually see, okay, this is what I'm being charged for, this is what the insurance company is going to pay, based on where I am in the year paying towards my deductible or whatnot, this is what I'm responsible for. And so making sure that everything on that sheet is correct goes a long way. There's lots of mistakes when it comes to medical billing, just like everything else, right? It's a human process, so there's going to be mistakes. And then also, in addition to keeping track of EOBs, anytime there's a claim denial, so when insurance comes back and says, we're not paying for that, understanding that as consumers of healthcare, we have the right to appeal that denial.
Yes, and I think a lot of people don't do that. The one time I had a serious surgery and I got billed for something, I appealed it, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we shouldn't have billed you for that," and it went away. It was
right.
It was kind of crazy, and they were like, "Oh yeah, never mind," and they didn't even really provide an explanation for why they billed me for it. It was kind of crazy.
And imagine if you hadn't appealed that, if you hadn't known that you have that right, you would have then had to come up with that money out of pocket. And for many people, a big expense like that is just, not possible, or it's going to, they're going to have to take money from other places. And so understanding the appeals process is key. And it's interesting because, it's a slightly different process depending on where someone gets their insurance, whether it's through an employer or through the state marketplace or Medicaid or Medicare. The process is slightly different, but the concept is the same. It's essentially where you're going back first to the insurer to say, can you take another look at this?
Right.
And, Sometimes, it sounds like in your case, they come back and they go, oh, yeah, we shouldn't have billed you. Like, you're good. Sometimes they still say no. Now, again, thanks to a couple of different laws, like the ACA and ERISA, as consumers, we actually have the ability to go get what's called an external medical review or an independent medical review. And it's a little different in each state, but that's where you're going to an independent entity and saying, okay, here are all the facts, right? Here's the insurance policy. Here's my medical information. Here's why what I received was medically necessary. Like, you now make the decision. And their decision is binding on the insurance company.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So if they come back and say, nope, the insurance company should have paid for it, then they have to pay for it.
Okay. And I assume that the insurance company is aware of this process.
I would certainly hope so. If they were doing their due diligence, I'm sure they're aware of it. Whether or not they make it easy for consumers is potentially another story. To your point about most people don't know about appeals, the Kaiser Family Foundation did a survey a few years ago, and they found that in the marketplaces, the state health insurance marketplaces, of the 40 plus million claims that were denied. So when the insurance company said, like, nope, we're not going to pay for that, less than 0.2% were appealed.
And when you consider, and this makes a lot of sense, because when you consider probably the majority of people who are consumers of that healthcare, they're probably going to be lesser informed, would be my guess.
I think most people are lesser informed. I mean, I think the statistics are probably pretty close for employer-sponsored insurance. We just don't necessarily have that tied up in the package that we get, with respect to data from the marketplace. So
you're probably right about that. A lot of people rely on their employer, which is probably the last person that you want to rely on, because they have a vested interest in saving money. So, the last person you want to rely on for advice on which health insurance carrier to pick is your employer. They're paying for it. They have a vested interest in saving money.
I mean, certainly. And I think sometimes people also forget, insurance companies are business, and so they also want to make money.
Correct.
They are an important part of our current system that we have right now, but they're not altruistic entities. They're businesses.
Not at all. Not at all. And people do really need to understand that and get that perspective. And the same thing goes for life insurance through your employer as well. Like all of those things, you need to keep in mind that they are not charities. They are in it to make money. Absolutely. We are up against a commercial break. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. Our guest this hour is Monica Bryant, Esquire. We're talking about how to stay out of financial trouble when you're met with a serious medical condition by properly insuring yourself and properly strategically using your medical insurance. We'll be back on the other side of the break.
Money Talk with Melanie features lively discussions of a wide range of global, domestic, and kitchen table financial topics. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
This broadcast of Money Talk with Melanie was previously recorded.
This is important because it's your money. Your money. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Hi, and we're back with Monica Bryant from Triage Cancer, and we're talking to her about how we can avoid being saddled with medical debt by strategically using our medical insurance, our health insurance, by picking the right insurance plan, how we can strategically maneuver our insurance plans, pick the right insurance plans, and et cetera. Another thing that you talk about is how you can use 3 easy steps to pick the right insurance plan for you, especially with fall enrollment coming up. And what are your tips regarding that?
First tip is to understand what the policy is actually going to cost you in a worst case scenario. Because that's actually why we buy insurance, right? We are insuring to protect ourselves in a worst case scenario. And so how do you do that? Well, you can't just take into consideration those monthly premiums. You have to look at, well, what if I need to actually use my policy? So there's a pretty simple math problem that you're going to look at. So it's your monthly premium times 12, because that's what you're going to pay in premiums for the year. And then you're going to add the out-of-pocket maximum for that plan. And when you do that for any plan that you are considering, you may actually be surprised that sometimes the policies with the higher monthly premiums end up being a few $1,000s less at the end of the year, assuming you were going to hit that out-of-pocket maximum.
So
and
it sounds like what you're saying is do the math.
Do the math. That is, in fact, a mantra that we use quite often at Triage Cancer. You've got to do the math. Because we want to make sure, you may find, okay, well, I still can't afford that, so I'm willing to take the risk that maybe I'm not going to hit my out-of-pocket maximum. But we just want everyone to be informed about the possibilities so that then they can make an educated, best decision for them.
And that makes perfect sense. And that applies to a lot of our spending. Where we think,
yeah.
Well, right, I'm just saying, like a lot of our spending where we think that we're better off with the lowest monthly payment. Many times that is how, creditors pull the okey doke on us, or I should say marketers pull the okey doke on us by saying, look how low this payment is. And it's like, no, that is not the best thing for you.
That's exactly right. And again, it's not a one-size-fits-all, because for someone who, is young and super healthy and maybe just goes for their annual checkup, maybe that math problem is going to, come out a little bit differently. But certainly for the community that we spend a lot of time speaking with, which are individuals who have a serious medical diagnosis, then it's about, well, how do you really protect yourself or insulate yourself for that worst-case scenario? And if more people did that, I think we would have fewer people in these huge medical debt situations. So step one is do the math. Once you've narrowed down the plans that you're considering, and this is true whether you are buying in the marketplace, whether you are going straight to an insurance company to buy, it's also true if you are offered more than one plan through an employer. Everybody should be doing the math here. And then once you've narrowed it down, you want to make sure that any plans you're considering cover your providers. And so that's going to be doctors and hospitals and pharmacies and labs. Those are all medical providers. And most health insurance policies have a network of providers that they will cover. And so you can pick, the cheapest plan for you, but if none of your doctors are included in that plan and you're going to be paying more to see out-of-network providers, that's not the best plan for you.
No, and if you have a doctor that you particularly like, you want to make absolutely sure that that doctor is in your network, right?
100%. And, where we see people sort of falling into problems is they might call up a doctor's office and say, hey, do you take Blue Cross Blue Shield? Okay, well, there are like hundreds of Blue Cross Blue Shield options. And so the recommendation is, that you're using the specific plan name. And I'm making this up, but do you take XYZ insurance company plan Blue 200? Because you want to make sure that they're looking for your specific plan.
Right, and I agree with that wholeheartedly, because there are different, you're right, there's kind of different names of specific plans within Blue Cross Blue Shield. Like everybody, it's kind of like, Kleenex being a different kinds of tissues. Like it's not.
That's a really good analogy. Yeah.
Right. All tissues are not called Kleenex. That's not how it works. And it's the same thing with Blue Cross Blue Shield. Like there's different kinds of Blue Cross Blue Shield. So you have to be really specific when you call your doctor's office.
Yeah. And don't just rely on, a website or even like a hospital website or frankly, even the insurance websites, because it's a little bit of garbage in, garbage out. Like, how often are those websites being updated? And as contracts expire and, people change, and sometimes, doctors retire mid-year or contracts change mid-year. And so it is really helpful to not just rely on what somebody sees on a website, but actually to call and speak with a human being to make sure before you make that decision.
Very true. Very true. And so what's the third thing?
So the third thing is to look at the plan's prescription drug formulary, which is just the list of prescription drugs that the plan covers and at what rate they cover them. And so, again, particularly for someone who has already been diagnosed with a serious medical condition, or really any medical condition, if you're taking a prescription drug, before you settle in on an insurance policy, make sure that that drug is covered by the plan. Because if it isn't, you're going to have insurance that really isn't working for you.
And whether or not it covers the, what do they call it, the name brand versus the generic?
Yes, absolutely. And so for, some people, usually in formularies, there are different tiers. And so, if something is a generic drug, it's going to be covered at, 80%. If it's, or you only have like a $5 copay. If it's a brand name tier 2, you'll have a $15 copay. And so drugs get put into certain classes or categories by the insurance company, and all that's listed on the formulary. And so understanding, I take this really expensive monthly, oral chemo pill. How does the plan treat that pill? Now, I will say there is something, not to get too far in the weeds for your listeners, but there is something called an exception request. And so, if a plan is saying, okay, we're only going to cover the generic of that drug, but there's a medical reason why someone needs the brand name, like maybe an allergy, there is a process very similar to the appeals process where you can basically ask the insurance company to make an exception in your case.
Yeah, they say that I've heard companies say that the generic is the same as the name brand. I'm calling buffoonery on that because if it was the same, it would be the same. You know what I'm saying?
I do, and I will say that, science is like magic, only real. I am not a scientist, but, I do know people that their doctors don't want them taking the generic.
That's right.
For legitimate reasons. And in that case, right, we're now talking about a medical need for the brand name drug. And so in those cases, again, we just want people to know that there actually is a process to get to access the drugs that you need. You just have to know what that process is.
Yes,
and that's what we're all about.
I had this debate with an insurance broker one time, a fellow insurance broker, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm calling buffoonery." No, sir, that is not the case. That is not true. Sorry, no. Having been through both, having tried a generic brand of a medication and a name brand, and having them operate clearly differently, like they're not the same. There's no way they're the same. And then going back to the name brand and everything going back to normal, like no.
Especially when we're talking about complex medical situations where there could be so many different factors, other drugs, other conditions. That there are times when people need that brand name, and that exception request or that appeals process is available for people.
Exactly. So, I would say that people need to be very careful about that and kind of not accept that as an answer. Sometimes they really aren't the same, and people should be careful about that.
I would agree with you, and certainly talking with, their medical team, if they're experiencing either, it's not solving their problem or they're experiencing challenges, that's an important thing to be talking with the medical team about.
Exactly.
On the flip side, there are lots of situations when a generic medication might be fantastic for someone and might be a way to save some money and avoid that medical debt. And so that's why, there's no one size fits all. It really is going to be situationally specific.
For sure. Absolutely, for sure. And you're right when you say the whole health insurance thing is super complex, as we've been discussing. And the parts that you should have learned in high school but didn't. And I think when I first started teaching financial literacy and choosing the healthcare plan as part of that curriculum, there were only 6 states that required financial literacy for graduation. And now I think we're up to 13 states that require that as part of your financial literacy. And that's not nearly enough when you consider it's 50 states. But what are some of the rights that people don't know that they have? I think we've hit on some of them. Because you say you shouldn't need a lawyer to get through a serious medical condition. What are some reasons that people end up consulting someone like you or availing themselves of your services as a lawyer when they have a serious medical condition? Why do people have to consult a lawyer sometimes?
So people definitely reach out to us with the need for financial assistance. And sometimes when we're talking with them, we find out, well, wait a minute, you don't actually need financial assistance. You need to understand the appeals process, or you need to understand the appeals process and get financial assistance. A lot of times it's about not having the right health insurance policies. So all the things we've already talked about.
Okay.
I will also say the other component that comes into play quite frequently is employment. So this country has, a very patchwork set of laws and policies related to dealing with your employment when you're dealing with a serious medical condition. And so for people to understand that, if they've been diagnosed with, let's say, cancer, and they need to take some time off from work, there may be a couple of different options for them to do that. Depending on where they live, they could have access to state benefits in addition to federal benefits, but it's all going to depend on things like employer size and how long somebody's worked there. And so understanding somebody's employment rights, I think, is a really key piece of all of this, because you can have the best health insurance in the world, but if you can't take time off to go to your doctor, that's a problem.
Yes, and that's ridiculous that it should even be connected to your employment. That's an area where I do think we fail as a country. You shouldn't have to worry about that if you have a chronic illness. I mean, that's not an area that you should have to, where you should have to worry, or where, your long-time employer should kick you to the curb if you have a chronic illness. Well, you're no good to us anymore, so bye.
Yeah, and I mean, we always, in all of our laws and policies, we have to balance the needs of all the stakeholders. And so I can certainly appreciate where there needs to be protections on the employer side as well. And there are. It's just about understanding, what the rules are and then how to use them. So, for example, for someone who works for a small employer, with, 20 employees, they're not going to have access to the FMLA.
Sure.
Where a lot of people, that's the one law a lot of people do know about in this space. So understanding that, in fact, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, provides a way to take time off through reasonable accommodations. And so it's really tricky, and what we do is super interesting because it crosses so many areas of the law. But people really should have, when they start working, they should have a basic understanding of the employment laws federally, but then also in their state.
For sure. And all of your social media, your website, has just great information regarding all of this. We're at the end of the hour, and I'd love for you to tell the audience where they can get in touch with you and avail themselves of your services, because you have great videos and just great information in every place where you're available.
Well, thank you so much for that. Yeah, we're on most of the major social media platforms as Triage Cancer. That's TRIAGE Cancer. And then our website is triagecancer.org. I will also invite anyone who is listening, even if you haven't been touched by cancer, but you are maybe dealing with another medical illness or you're a caregiver, please do feel free to check out all of our free resources. Just take the word cancer out and plug in whatever you're dealing with, because it really is applicable to anyone.
Thanks so much, Monica Bryant, for being on the show at Triage Cancer. The show will be posted as a podcast very shortly, and I'll be sure to tag you and send you a link so you can share it and people can listen to the podcast and get all this information again. Thank you, Monica Bryant, Triage Cancer.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is important because it's your money. Your money. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
The opinions expressed on the following program are strictly those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of WCZT, regional media, coastal broadcasting, personnel, or advertisers. This broadcast of Money Talk with Melanie was previously recorded.
Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. We're heading into the second hour, and if you missed the first hour, shame on you. You missed Monica Bryant, Esquire, who's the founder of Triage Cancer, and she spoke with us about how we can effectively use health insurance so that we don't end up drowning in medical debt when we receive a serious medical diagnosis. Just very informative. How we can prepare ahead of time by picking the right type of health insurance, and how we can use that insurance strategically once we have been diagnosed with a serious medical condition. Just really informative, good information, and also provides us with where we can contact her organization, Triage Cancer, to get really good information on our rights and medical insurance, just information everybody could use, in my opinion. And if you missed it, you can go back and listen to the podcast here on 98.7 The Coast's website, or you can follow me on social media at Money Talk Mel on Twitter. It'll be posted there, or at Money Talk Melanie on Facebook, or anywhere where you listen to podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts. All of those places where you find podcasts, you will find this episode of Money Talk with Melanie. Our next guest is going to be Brett Oubre in a couple of minutes. He's going to talk to us about 12 steps to boundaryless success. He has a very interesting backstory that'll talk to us about. And if anyone knows no boundaries, it's Brett Oubre. So I'm excited to talk to him about that. And he wrote a whole book with 12 steps to how we can succeed as business people. So I'm excited to talk to him about that. But in the meantime, I ran across an article that I thought was really important. We talked a little bit in the news about how older people are going back into the workforce. But I also ran into an article that talked on Market Watch that talked about how more and more older people are unfortunately getting scammed because of lower incomes. And that is, my computer's acting up on me. That is because of retirement scams. So just be careful out there with the retirement scams. I'm worried about those retirement scams that are out there. Just don't fall for them. I'm very concerned about them, and more older people are getting scammed with retirement scams, and there are many. First of all, the most important thing is be careful about who you pick for a financial advisor. Bernie Madoff style. If you find a financial advisor that is making people a lot of money and you don't find any cyclical dips, if you will, in your financial returns, there's always going to be dips. There should not be an automatic, strategic, always making money when it comes to your investments. If you have that kind of person, that kind of advisor, that person is probably a scammer. I'm just saying. And that's one of the most important signs that your financial advisor is not doing well. Now, should you be losing money? Like people have been posting specifically on social media that their accounts are getting killed. Their retirement accounts are getting killed. And that's just because of the state of the economy. That shouldn't be happening unless, of course, the economy and the stock market is getting killed. Remember, keep in mind that your retirement accounts are long-term investing and things should turn around. Try not to freak out. Try to stay the course. But people are getting, and a lot of it is because of the economic decisions that those people in the White House are making. I'm just saying, and that's problematic. Another thing that I find it's kind of exciting is that more and more workers are still ditching their offices for remote jobs. And why wouldn't you? Who doesn't want to work from home? Although I will say this, I find that when I work from home, I work longer and harder and with less distractions. I will just keep working. I will just stay on my computer and just work for hours. So except for I don't know, when you're teaching, you just teach a class and get off the computer. But I'll do some other work. I'll stay on my computer and work on something else. And then another class will come up and I'll teach that. And then once that class is over, I'll just stay on my computer and keep working. So I think, if companies can keep people working remote, it's going to benefit them. And a lot of workers are enjoying working from home, apparently. According to LinkedIn, a lot of people, LinkedIn said in February of this year that remote jobs received 50% of all the applications during that month, despite representing less than 20% of all the jobs that were posted. So people are not really applying for these in-office jobs. And I'm finding that in the listings that I see on LinkedIn, that people are emphasizing in the listings that this is an on-site job. Like they're emphasizing this is not remote or this is only 20% remote. A lot of agencies have received a 25% increase in the number of people that are seeking remote positions. It's very interesting that a lot of people are really looking for those remote type positions. And I guess why wouldn't you? There's something to be said for wanting to work from home. And with the cost of gas, the gas prices are going down some, but not tremendously. It's still over $4, which is not low by any stretch of the imagination. Another thing that I've seen is that more businesses are hiring more security and reducing hours. Have you found this, that your favorite places to shop have reduced hours? This is because of crime. I have found that a few of my favorite places to shop don't have the same hours that they used to, are not open as late as they used to, particularly in urban areas. I found this in my cities where I shop. Places are not open nearly as late as they used to be. And this is because of the crime rate. We need to do something about crime in our urban areas. In your New Yorks, your Californias, those areas. Recently, I have a job where I get to travel to Chicago and different places like that. Those places are not open because of the crime. So businesses are increasing their security, but they're also not staying open as late, which is unfortunate. That means that things are going to cost more, and those costs are going to be turned over to who? The consumer, which also impacts inflation. Everything that costs more money contributes to inflation. And we talked about this a little bit the last hour about financial literacy. And I've had this article in my notes for weeks now, and I'm finally going to get to talk about it. This article that I ran into in Kiplinger, which talked about addressing financial literacy. We have a financial literacy crisis, and it talked about how it begins at home. I know I was taught the importance of saving, and that was from my parents. that it was really important to save your money. But did my parents know much about investing and things like that? No, they didn't know a lot about that, but they did know a lot about saving money. So and a lot of our financial skills, our feelings about money, how we treat money comes from our parents, comes from our childhood. Whether or not we feel good about money, whether or not we feel like there's scarcity about money, comes from our childhood. So how do we have financial skills? How do we know how to invest? How do we know how to pay our taxes? Now we have the internet, so there's no excuse to not know how we should be handling our money. Now it's taught now 13 states require that it's taught in school. If you want to know basic economics, there's tons of free courses. But if you don't understand how financial literacy works, how you should handle your finances, look under personal finance on the internet. Encourage your kids to pay attention in their financial literacy classes in school. It's very important, and it's going to set your family up for generational wealth. These are the things that wealthy people know, and there's no trick to it. There's no science to it. You can be poor today, and your next generations can be wealthy just by doing some common sense personal finance things. So I encourage everyone to do that. Just a very important thing to do. On the other side of the break, we're going to be talking to Brett Oubre. Very excited to talk to him about his upcoming book, 12 Steps to Boundaryless Success. We'll be back on the other side of the break.
Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
This broadcast of Money Talk with Melanie was previously recorded.
Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. Our guest this second hour is author Brett Oubre. He's going to discuss his new book, 12 Steps of Boundaryless Success. A little bit about Brett. He is a sought-after, emotional speaker. Let's start again. Brett K. Oubre is a sought-after motivational speaker and soon-to-be published author. He is also an accomplished CEO and the owner-operator of 6 top-performing automotive dealerships in the Southeast U.S. Since 2013, he has been inspiring audiences of people from different life walks to find a way forward past circumstances, challenges, and excuses which block great potential from being realized. Oubre uses his platforms to teach and equip others, no matter their personal and professional circumstances, to live life fully and audaciously. From the depths of his own life path of growing up with little resources and hope, building success only to watch it almost all crumble, fully recovering a brain tumor and a paralyzed arm, and surviving a private plane crash, he understands how life often presents people with 2 choices: stay stuck or find a way forward. His journey as an overcomer has given him a gift, an opportunity to lead others to live hopeful and expectant of realizing their purposes. When Oubre is not traveling for motivational speaking and professional engagements, he can be found recharging on a boat or soaking in the sunshine on the beach. He also enjoys relaxing with a good book. Oubre continues building on his own dreams and plans to see all 50 states and have a beach house someday. With only one life to live, Oubre wants to teach people to awaken what lies within themselves, to execute each day with excellence, and to be equipped to leave an impactful footprint on the world. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Brett Oubre.
Hey, Melanie. Thank you for the invite to the show.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well today. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm so excited to have you on the show. I'm just delighted that our mutual friend Eden introduced us, and that you're going to be on the show to talk about the 12 steps. Or the wait, let me make sure I say this right. I always do this.
No, you're fine.
I'm going to make sure that I get this absolutely correct. The 12 steps to boundaryless success. I want to know success without boundaries for sure.
Correct. Well, I appreciate you inviting me here, and I thank you for even connecting us as well, and I'm thrilled and delighted to be on the show as well.
Yes, indeed. So tell me about your background. Is there anything that we left out?
Well, you made it sound better than it was. I mean, you did a pretty good job of that. I had two well-educated parents that my dad decided to switch vocations in the middle and went into the ministry. And so by doing that, he took a vow of poverty, literally. And so we went from, and I was very young, so I don't remember, but we went from one type of life to another, and, it was, I don't want to say hopeless, but it was, a situation where, I remember hearing several times, people like us don't, do what those folks do. And I always thought in my head as a young child, well, why not? Why can't we get there? What is that pathway? What is that step forward, and how is that realized? And so as I've, always looked for the opportunity, get outside of the line, so to speak, and, look for that pathway forward, we went to the book and we documented that. And not that if you take these 12 steps that you're going to absolutely fix your life, because execution is the number one thing that it requires, but you will get 12 steps to be able to put it into your path and execute to be able to go forward.
Because I think the operative word here is to move, right?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, that's so many people want a magical formula, and I do think we give you a practical formula, but you have to be able to take action. I mean, a friend of mine, when I started talking about writing a book, I said, "What do you think the secret to writing a book is?" He said, "Pull out a piece of paper and write." He said, "You'll figure the rest of it out." Yeah. And so I think that's, that's and some of that's in the book as well, is that, you have to be willing to make mistakes to go forward. You have to be willing to learn on the fly and not have a finite process about everything. I mean, there's going to be some things that are very murky, and you're going to have to do it and go, okay, we went this way, we figured that out, and now we got to take a detour, we got to turn the car around, we got to go in a different direction.
Yes, this is true, but the key is to keep moving, though, right?
Correct. Well, the key is to keep moving, but as well as evaluate, why did I have to turn that car around? What lessons did I learn along the way? And rather than internalize that process and make it a low self-esteem event, I got to internalize that and say, I'm not a bad person, I made a mistake, and what can I put in my repertoire so that doesn't happen again? At least those things don't happen again.
Ah, that's very good. So one of the things that you say, and is there a particular order that these steps need to go in? Because one of the things that I saw that you said is to develop a positive mindset, and I would think, not that they go in a particular order, but I would think that this probably would be the first thing, because this is going to set you up for the rest.
Well, we're going to let them buy the book to figure that out. But the number one is there is a particular order, and positive mindset is towards the top. I mean, you can't look at a doomsday mentality and go anywhere. I mean, there's two types of people, and there's the type of person that says, I can, I will, and there's somebody that says, I can't and I won't. And if you look at something as I can't and I won't, I mean, sometimes we have to make tough business decisions. And one of the things we had to do here recently is we had to let somebody go. We came in behind them and started looking at the reasons that we wouldn't succeed. And the first 2 days they were gone, that particular position, we had two of the biggest days that we've had in the company at some of the other locations. And when we started evaluating what happened is that particular person was looking at the opportunities as these are not real opportunities, and they were just saying no, 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 rather than looking at the situation outside the lines and going, okay, if I do this, I can do that, and if I do this, I can do that. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense. That does make sense. It makes that makes a lot of sense.
And when I lost the use of my arm, I could have looked at it and gone, well, I don't have the use of my arm. Maybe I need to sign up for disability and sit at the house and, start hurting my back, or I could figure out how to do something that most people don't. And, I mean, there were days when I tried to move my finger that I remember I learned to tap my finger, and somebody that I know well came in to see me, and he saw me. I said, hey, let me show you this. And I started showing this person that I could tap my finger, and he looked at me and goes, that's what you want to show me? It took me, and I'm not chastising that person, but, it took me all day long to learn to tap my finger, and I was sweating bullets when I learned to do it. However, the process was I had to tap the finger to start moving the rest. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, because that was a starting point.
Correct. It's like, if you want to have a warm fire in the winter in your living room, you got to first put in the wood, then you got to add the fuel source, and then you got to add the match. It doesn't go in reverse order.
That makes sense. You have to start somewhere. And I don't know if I've heard in a lot of these kinds of books that you have to set goals, that setting goals is really important. Now, I've never been a big goal setter, but maybe I have. I've always just said, I'm going to do this, and then I do it.
Well, I think goal setting is I don't want to say a tired model, but I think goal setting is, I think you got to set benchmarks, and you got to be willing to relook at those benchmarks on a, whether you want to call it a daily basis or weekly basis. It sounds to me like you do have places that you want to go, but you're reevaluating those things in your mind on a daily basis. And, one of the things I tell our team, and I've told folks that I've mentored, is when you wake up in the morning, you know what you're capable of. When you go to sleep tonight, you know what you did. And you're looking at yourself in the mirror both times. And you, at the end of the day, you know what you left on the table. And the people that are able to self-evaluate don't make it a low self-esteem event. They're able to look at it and go, okay, I missed today, but I'm not going to miss tomorrow. Whereas the people that create a low self-esteem event, they go, well, it's Susie's fault because she came in and talked to me, or Mary wanted me to help her with this, or I was sick and I had to go to the bathroom 6 times, or whatever the reasons are that they didn't execute forward. At one point in my life when I wasn't succeeding, it was in a sales role, and I would get up, and I call it get ready to get ready. I would get up and I would shift all the stuff on my desk. I would sharpen my pencils 4 or 5 times. I would clean out my desk drawer and put it back together. I would make sure, in those days, I would make sure my calendar was fresh, had fresh pages, and my pens were all in the right way. And what I was really doing was trading productivity for activity. And it made me feel better because I could go home and say, well, I didn't do anything today, but my desk sure is ready to go tomorrow.
But your desk looks fantastic.
Correct. But the reality is that if you're in a sales role, if you're not eyeball to eyeball, belly to belly, or ear to ear with the customer, I'm unemployed. And so that's what a lot of folks do. Whatever they want to lose weight, you got to quit eating. You got to change what you put in your mouth. If you want to create wealth financially, you have to start with a program. You got to start putting together some pennies and nickels today, and then start investing tomorrow. It's not I put $100 here and then I get $1 million back. That's the lottery mindset. You have to, and there's very few lottery winners. You have to have a program, a plan, a piece of action, and you have to execute it on it daily.
That is very true. That is for sure. And perfecting your self-evaluation skills. How does one do that? And not to give away the book, I don't know if this part is in the book or not, but how do you do that objectively?
I mean, me personally, my thought process, my teaching process, my stuff that we talk in motivational seminars about, and the stuff we talk to our people here and the people I mentor is again, you have to fix your self-esteem, because if you have low self-esteem, you're not going to be able to self-evaluate, because the self-evaluation is going to become self-manipulation, because people who have low self-esteem cannot self-evaluate, because if they do, they beat themselves up to a point where they can't handle this internal conversation. So if you understand that it's not about you, we all make mistakes. I make mistakes, you make mistakes. People that you think that are at a higher level of execution in society make mistakes. But what they know that the other folks don't, that it's not about me. I'm not a bad person because I didn't do it the right way. I'm not a bad person because I made a blunder today. It simply means I'm a human being. And what I got to do is I got to self-evaluate in such a way that I objectively look at it and go into what made me make those decisions. Was it procrastination? Was it laziness? Was it a situation where I was impulsive? Was it I didn't get the right counsel? Did I only use my only wits about my only perspective rather than getting others in the room that have a better perspective and try to learn with their counsel and borrow from their influence? And when I can do that and do that well, my success is going to go a lot faster than if I just try to do it on my own, or if I don't do it at all because I have low self-esteem.
Yeah, I prefer not to do it at all. I don't know that I have low self-esteem, but every time I listen to myself on the radio, I'm like, that was trash. Maybe that's what.
Yeah. Well, I think I believe that particular thing
yes.
is not a low self-esteem. I think that particular thing is you are evaluating, but you tend to operate at a high level from what I've been told by Eden. So I do the same thing. Every day I go, I don't know if you say it's trash, but you say, well, I've got much better than that in me. I'm sitting here self-evaluating as we're talking, and I'm thinking back to what I just said a few minutes ago, and I'm going, ooh, I should have said this. Ooh,
I should have said this that way. I should have said that differently. Same thing when I do TV appearances, and I belong to kind of a group of people who do TV appearances as part of an organization, and I'll see other people who do something similar. And I'll see them do it, and I'm like, I want to be as good as she is. You know what And I'm like, why am I not as good as she is?
That's the part when you start operating at a higher level, Melanie, because if you start operating at a higher level, what you're doing is you're self-evaluating rather than saying, I'm trash. And I think that's what substantiates the two. Most people go, I'm trash, I can't do it. They let fear set in. And so what they either do is they start shooting at the people that are operating at a higher level, or they block it out altogether, and they become mediocre.
Oh, no, never that. No, mediocrity is not a thing.
And I think that's what makes the difference between people that, I don't know that, as far as the book's concerned, I think it's going to be of more value to people that are not operating at a high level, because not that it won't be speak into people's life that are operating at a high level, but the people that are not, the vision of the book is, you came for a certain position of your life, you had these high goals, these high dreams, these high aspirations, and you let the fire burn out. And there's one or more reasons that you let the fire burn out, and that's where the 12 steps come in.
There it is.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. There's nothing that grinds my gears more than mediocrity, I have to be honest. Like that, mediocrity drives me legitimately insane. Like, I can't stand to see anyone just, don't do it if you're going to be mediocre. Just don't even bother.
Correct.
Why are you bothering? Don't even get up in the morning if you're going to be mediocre about anything.
And some people are slotted in mediocrity, and this is part of the book. Some people are slotted in mediocrity because they simply have never gotten in a position where they're operating in their strength zone. And if I do, me personally, if I do something that's not in my strength zone, I promise you it's going to be mediocre.
True.
Even though I operate at a high level at things that I do, if it's not in my talent set, I'm not going to be as good as somebody who's operating in their talent set. If I go into an accountant's office and I start trying to do accounting, it's going to appear mediocre or less because that's not my strength. However, I may still be putting in the effort. Does that make sense to you?
It does. You may still be putting it, but you can tell when you lack the passion, or it, like you said, it's not in your zone. But could that be an area where you could expand, maybe, and make it part of your zone? Is that possible?
Me personally, I don't believe that. I believe that if we're all set with a subset of talents, and I don't know that you can teach yourself a talent that you're not straddled with. I think that the best way I've ever learned it. I learned it years ago from a mentor, and this person, she said one of the two questions I ask on every interview is, tell me about a time that at the end of the day you went home and even though you put in a full day, that you didn't have any energy. In fact, towards the end of the day, you felt like you were going to just pass out. And then tell me about a time that at the end of the day, even though you put in a full day, and you were tired, but you had more energy, more vibrant for life, and you wanted to go home and tell everybody about it, and you almost didn't want to leave and quit working. That is your talent zone.
Ah, that's pretty good.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, that sounds like something a career coach would say.
Sure. Well, this was just one of my mentors, but I've used that on interviews for the last 25 or 30 years, and you can almost see people light up and connect the dots. And me personally, that's what I've done and learned to see. I think many people, even though they want to work hard, they get caught in this trap where they accept a position or they start down a path because they say, okay, this is what my mom did, this is what my dad did, this is the safe bet, this is where I need to go to make the best income, or this is what's easy because I know Sally, Jim, Mary, and Joe, and they own this company, and they're going to give me an opportunity. And that's the ones that look at their watch and go, it's 4:59, and they start packing up at 4:50. Or they start packing up at 4:40, or they quit at 4:30, or whatever it is, versus the one that says, can we, I can't believe it's 7 o'clock, and I'm still working, even though they need to be home at 5 because they've got other things responsibilities that they need to be taken care of. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It makes perfect sense. We're up on a break. We're speaking with Brett Oubre about the 12 steps to boundaryless success. Very excited to speak to him this evening about how we can move forward, but you have to be ready to move forward, and that's what his upcoming book is talking about. He is an engaging storyteller, survivor, and overcomer, as well as a successful CEO. So we are delighted to talk to him, and we will be back with Brett Oubre on the other side of the break.
Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
This broadcast of Money Talk with Melanie was previously recorded.
Money Talk with Melanie features entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. Our guest this hour is author Brett Oubre, and we are discussing his upcoming book, 12 Steps to Boundaryless Success. And we were talking about some of the highlights from the book and how you can move forward when you are ready to tackle boundaryless success. We were talking about how we need to perfect our self-evaluation skills, enhance our view of ourselves, very important, becoming an expansive thinker. Another thing that I saw was getting serious about personal growth. This really hit home with me. It's something I've been working on this summer. I've referred to it as Adventure Girl Summer, but it's one of the things that I've been really working on actually for about the past 6 months. So it really hit home for me, getting serious about personal growth. What are some things that you mean when you say getting serious about personal growth, Brett?
Well, I had a guy who ended up being a mentor, and I'd gotten a new position, and I was in this training class, and there was probably 50 of us in there. And, I'm going through the class and doing all the things that everybody else was doing, I thought. And at one of the breaks, he pulled me aside, and I didn't know him. This was my second day there, and he pulled me aside, and he said, I've been watching you for the last 2 days. And he said, you've got more potential than I think you can even see. He said, but you're wasting it. And he said, you're not coming forward with full effort. You're not coming forward with everything that you have the ability to do, and you're not tapped into your talent. And he said, the first thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to narrow your focus down to 3 areas that you want to be great in. And he said, you're going to have to go to work and read on a professional level at a minimum of 1 hour a day. And he said, if you'll do that in 5 years, you'll become an expert in those topics. And, that I didn't know the guy, and that hit home with me. And so for the last 20, 25 years. Every morning, when I say every morning, I mean every morning. If I wake up with a headache, if I'm on vacation, if I'm taking a little retreat, I get up, I set my clock, and I get up and I read for 1 hour a day. And I'm telling you, Melanie, I did it this morning, it sets the mind in motion for creativity, for problem solving, for goal setting, for evaluation, and for everything that we just talked about. And so I invite everyone that I mentor and everybody I get close to commit. And if you're not a reader, again, there's always a workaround. Do an audio book, do something, listen to a podcast, do something that is moving that mind forward at least an hour a day, but you got to be very intentional about it. You got to pick the areas that you want to learn in, and pick the areas that you want to grow in. You got to feed that food to your mind.
That is excellent advice. I've heard it before. I don't know how many times we have to hear persons like yourself, successful persons like yourself, saying that the key to success is personal growth and reading. So something about success, listening to a podcast like Money Talk with Melanie an hour a day.
That's right.
An hour a day in the morning. I've heard that constantly. I also strongly advise coaching. I recently have 2 coaches. I'm not going to get into what kind of coaches, but 2. And I've been doing this for the last 6 months, and I cannot explain how helpful they have been in my life.
Yeah, I think it's the accountability piece more than anything else.
Yes, absolutely.
We judge ourselves based on our intentions, and everybody else judges us based on our actions. We'll give ourselves a pass. They won't.
Yes. And one of my coaches said, it sounds to me like you need an advocate, and I'm your advocate. And I was like, oh my gosh. And she is. And it's been so helpful.
Yeah, I think coaching's an excellent piece, but if somebody's not at the stage of the game that they can get a coach for $20, you can get a coach in your living room, or now with the podcast and the audio portions of YouTube and even the visual portions of YouTube, you can get it for nothing.
Right.
You know, but the thing is you got to be intentional, and you have to focus, and you have to execute. Because what a lot of people do is they have the New Year's resolution focus on learning, and everybody makes these resolutions of what they're going to do, and they do it for a week, a day, 6 days, and they want to fix everything in a 2-week time span that they spent all year not doing, and none of that's any good. They might as well not have done it at all.
Exactly.
It's like the alcoholic saying they're going to quit drinking. Well, it made it worse than if you just never said that.
You really do. You do. You just made it worse.
Regret. Yeah.
Why bother? Why bother? And it gets back to mediocrity, though. A mediocre mindset versus an absolute positive, I'm going to kill it, kick butt mindset.
And that goes back to the book. The book is for people who, at one point, nobody's ever said that nobody ever, starts life and goes, you know what? I'm just going to be mediocre. I'm going to be terrible. I'm going to struggle through life.
Are you sure, Brett? I'm not sure about that, because I feel like I'm around people who constantly, that's their goal.
Well, I'm not saying it's not their goal now.
I'm like, are you sure they didn't wake up with that attitude?
I'm not sure that that's their goal now, but they're also probably not being authentic with you. I just mean their entire life, that at some point, I mean, if you get in a room full of kids, at some point, they wanted to do something. And that's what we're trying to reignite with the 12 steps of Boundaryless Success.
Okay. Is there a part of the book that addresses, like, okay, what happened where you lost your spark? Is there something that makes people lose their spark? Because I assume that at some point in people's, like, everybody had this goal to be awesome, right? Didn't everybody assume I just always assumed I was going to be awesome. Was that not a thing? Like,
But I always felt like I could be successful, but I felt that there were times in my life that I felt that was impossible, but that's where the find the way forward comes.
True. Yes.
You say, I may have failed today, but I'm going to keep holding the vehicle straight or the steering wheel straight or whatever you want to call it. And tomorrow's going to be a different day. All I got to do today, I just got to get through today. And then tomorrow I'll get another new opportunity. But I think there's a lot of folks, it happens slowly over time. And then all of a sudden they wake up and they realize, hey, I'm not on the pathway that I want to be, but they don't know how to go back the other way. At this point, they've already created responsibilities. They've created a life pattern. They've created a mediocre pattern. They may have even created an energy pattern, and it's going to take something to re-spark them, and that's where the 12 steps come in.
Ah, okay. And those energy patterns are probably very difficult to reroute. You said something there when you said you've created an energy pattern, mm-hmm. And if I think I know what you mean by an energy pattern, that energy pattern is probably the most difficult thing to reroute.
It is, and and part of that energy pattern again is a lot of people get slotted into something that they hate, and it goes back to those two questions. When you get slotted into something you hate, it zaps you from all the energy that you have. And, when you see anybody making a turn, number one is they get into something that energizes them, and number two is they make a reverse course. And that's difficult for a lot of people to do if they can't paint the picture of what success looks like in their head. And I think most people, that flame has gone out, and a lot of it is because of self-denial. It's because they think people like us can't do the things that other people do. And then I think number three is so many people paint this vision of success as I've got to be a celebrity, I've got to be a professional football player, I've got to be somebody that's well recognized in the world. And I've met librarians that are executing at a high level. I've met people that are housekeepers that are executing at a high level. I've met people that are just as ordinary can be, but they are excited about what they do on a daily basis because
right.
They're putting themselves in a position to win.
Right, because there are people who definitely think I'm special, and I assure them regularly that I am not.
Correct.
I'm like, I could not be more ordinary. Trust me. Trust me when I tell you. If you pull back the curtain behind the scenes, believe me, I'm as ordinary as they come. And mess up and yeah, as they come. But
we all feel that way, right? We all feel like there's something that we're special for. But I mean, one of the exercises I've done with some folks is let's ride through the cemetery and look at these plots. Have you ever heard of any of these people? Probably not. But I guarantee you, they thought they were special too. And so we've got a window of opportunity to make our mark on this world. And you don't want to end up at the end of the day with regrets rather than well done.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And there's, you probably have read this book or heard of this book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and It's All Small Stuff.
Correct.
And it talks about, age, and, people say, oh, I'm too old for this, I'm too old for that. Like just, and it has this point in the book where it talks about how you're still going to be the same age in 5 years. Mm-hmm. Whether you do what you want to do or not. So just do it.
There's never a time that's too late. The time that's too late is when you're laying on the deathbed and you can't get up and go.
Right.
That's when it's too late, and you don't want to wait till that portion to do it. But that's where the 12 steps come in again, is to reignite that passion, because people wait that long because they've lost their passion, and they have to figure that out. Whether they lost their passion at 18 years old or they lost their passion at 50, it's going to take some kind of spark to reignite that to move them forward in a positive direction.
Now, I love that there's more, but you also say to prioritize resilience. Mm-hmm. And I think resilience is a lost art. I will tell you, as an educator, I think it's something that we're losing teaching kids. I don't think that we are teaching kids resilience. In my opinion, we coddle kids way too much. I don't think that we teach them that, that it's okay to cry if we face a difficult problem. Like, we try to save them from that. Oh, your class is so hard. Oh, that problem is so hard. My kid cried. Well, and I cried through 4 statistics classes getting my master's. It happens. I still got a B. Yes, it happens, because when you face difficult things, you're going to cry. There's going to be some tears, and that's okay. It's called being resilient.
It is what it is, right? I mean, I got to get through it so that I can, if I'm let's use your example. If I'm taking a statistics class, and I'm not going to be a statistician, right? I still have to check the box so that I can get to where I want to go. And so I prioritize that in such a way where I give the effort that it requires. And that's what I think you were talking about earlier, is can you be good in something that's not your talent zone. No, I don't think I'm going to be the best person in that class, but I can do enough where I can get through it so that I can get to go where I want to go and be great in those particular areas.
Exactly. And I think it's a lost art, and I think you need to learn to be resilient, or you're not going to get to where you want to go. I'm still not good with commas. I feel bad for one of my high school English teacher, bless her heart, rest in peace, Miss Jenkins, that tried her best to teach me about commas. I'm still not good with commas, and I'm sure I cried over many a red ink over trying to know where my commas go. And you're gonna cry when you're not mastering something, when you're just not good. But you have to be resilient, and you have to make that a priority. Just be an overcomer and not a victim.
And that's what, when you say that you're not good with commas, it goes back to what I was saying about talent, is that's never going to be your talent. But what you can do is you can bring somebody around you that's good with commas so that together y'all accomplish more, because that person's going to make sure that your commas and that people take you seriously when they read your material, because everything's fit and dialed in and tight and in a good package. See, I'm the same way. I'm not, whenever writing this book, I've got somebody proofreading it and bringing it together, because if you read my thoughts, it would look like one big run-on sentence.
Exactly. Tell people where they'll be able to get the book, where they can reach out to you for speaking, and etc.
We're going to be starting the pre-sales on Amazon and my website, Brett, B-R-E-T-T, Oubre, O-U-B-R-E.com. That's Brett, B-R-E-T-T, last name O-U-B-R-E.com. We have a fan page on Facebook, which is my first name, middle initial K, and my last name. We're on Twitter. We're on TikTok. We're on Instagram. And, they can go to any of those places and send us a message.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Brett Oubre. We look forward to your book coming out. I'm sure everybody will pick it up, The 12 Steps to Boundaryless Success. Thank you so much for being on the show this evening. We appreciate it.
And thank you, Melanie, and thank you, Eden, for connecting us.
Yes, thank you,
Eden.
This
opportunity with you today.
Yes, thank you, Eden Gorton-Hill. She rocks. She's the best.
And if I can do anything for you, Melanie, please let me know.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Brett. Have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Money Talk with Melanie features entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
This broadcast of Money Talk with Melanie was previously recorded.
Money Talk with Melanie features entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
I'd like to thank everybody for listening to Money Talk with Melanie this evening. I'd like to thank my guests, Monica Fawzi Bryant, Esquire, and Brett Oubre. Please do tune into Money Talk with Melanie next week, where my guest will be Tim Donahue, Regional Vice President at Inspire Diagnostics, where he will discuss how COVID testing has changed the future face of diagnostics. And we will also have Jody Sacco, who is the founder of Action Coach. She'll join us to discuss how entrepreneurs can avoid burnout and protect their mental health. Remember, all of this is very important because after all, it's your money.
Money Talk with Melanie features entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.